Guys, welcome. Happy Monday. Hope you've had a great weekend. We'll just wait for Lockie to jump on and talk all things men tonight. And potentially even for the women that jump on. Here he is. Straight into it. Oh, has joined. Oh, sorry, mate. I think just needs to request to join. And then there we go. Now we're on. Guys, welcome. Benny. Big fella.
How are you, mate? You well?
Yeah, very well. You?
Yeah, going really well. Can you hear me all right?
Mate, I've got you. Have you got a bit of an echo at your end on me, or is that all right?
No, but good.
Beautiful. Guys, if you hear an echo or anything, just let us know. Mate, thanks for joining us. You're up the road, but obviously we can't touch base at the moment and do anything in person, but hopefully that will all lighten up soon enough.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate, because it was about to happen, and then the old restrictions tightened back up. But it's all good.
Mates, I want to start with what got you into this space. Often, for so many people, it's their passion stems from some kind of pain or from a lack of support that they would have liked that they didn't have in whatever area it is. But what got you started in the men's space or passionate about it?
Yeah, interesting question. I always feel like every time I get asked it, I could answer it a million different ways. But I think ultimately for me, it feels like this sort of natural progression. Mental health's been in my family, and it was never really something that we spoke about or understood. And I was first exposed to suicide when I was 14, when a mate took his life by suicide. And even still then, I pushed it under the cover, and it was never spoken about. It was just like, that happened, move on. And it was only when I started to have my own mental health challenges that I started to sort of dive deeper into trying to understand what it was all about and what I was experiencing. And through that sort of whole process, I started documenting things that I was trying and stuff that I was learning, and it just sort of built momentum through Instagram, actually. And that sort of pushed me into having people go, oh, can you help me with this, that, and the other. And I never wanted to, I guess it was never like a goal to be in the space. That's why I say it's sort of natural progression, but it was really sort of honed in on this space back at the start of, or end of 2017, start of 2018. I was in Germany, or actually I can't remember. I was going to get a schnitzel and a pint. Anyway, that's all I remember. Someone messaged me on Instagram, and it sort of triggered me to think, or sparked the conversation with myself, like, what did I need when I was sort of at my rock bottom? And for me, I feel what would have helped me sort of navigate through life's challenges was a community of blokes that had success, in a range of different areas that I could sort of, learn from and sort of take what I need and, also learn from what I don't need. And that's when I sort of, I think it was one of the first videos on this Men That Can profile is me walking down the street saying, hey, gents, when we get back, we're doing a men's circle. Come along, bring one, bring many. And it's just evolved from that. So, yeah, I think it's just been, my own experience and then getting to chat with people from all over that just sort of pulled me into it.
What's the difference between how you looked at men's health or mental health in general, actually, say 4 or 5 years ago to how you look at it now, whether it's the stigma that was attached that's kind of shifting or whether it's how you approach it? What's the difference for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never been asked that question. I think it's become, and it may be because my head's sort of in this space now that everyone I talk to is sort of aware of it, but I think it's definitely, becoming more common to be in environments like this, to understand that, if I was in an environment like the one that I've created, or, the one that you're in as well, like back in the day, I would have been like, that's just fucking weird, having groups of men talking about their emotions. And doing all this personal development stuff, that wasn't for me, and definitely the environment that I was in didn't sort of support that or encourage that. So I think now it's becoming, and due to the great work that you guys are doing, and what we have access to on social media and all these things, we're starting to see that it is okay, and it's actually, it works. So I think to summarize, I think it's just people are becoming more understanding and actually realizing that it might not be what their preconceived ideas were of this kind of thing. I had a preconceived idea of what reading meant and of what mindfulness meant, but now that I do it, I live and breathe it, and it's nothing to what my first thoughts were.
I think one of the things for me, and I'm sure this is part of the feedback that you get as well, one of the things that resonated for me with what you do is similar to us in terms of there is still very much a strong stigma around men's work.
Yeah.
And, respectfully, so I understand it, having been to some men's circles, they were quite alternative. And if you're one of the blokes, like you or I, and you're dipping your toe in for the first time and you experience something that's really kind of like the really long hugs or the eye gaze, and that's your first step, that can be a bit too much for a lot of guys. Like I know a number of blokes in our world just wouldn't resonate with it, especially with where they're at. So one of the things that really drew me to you is you do come across as the bloke who still loves a beer, good kind of banter and chat with the missus, plenty good mates, throw around some tin. Like you fit that norm, and you're helping take the stigma and the cringiness out of the men's space, which has, been attached for so long and is obviously starting to shift as well. But I assume that's the type of feedback you're getting.
Yeah, and it's cool to hear that. But I think it's exactly that, because there is some cringy stuff, and I think what I like to be mindful of, and I like to tell people, like, there's going to be people who resonate with how I do things and how you do things. There's going to be people who think I'm an absolute dickhead as well, which is all cool, because I think what the intention should always be, or the goal should always, or outcome, whatever it is, if you're wanting to improve yourself, and men's work is something that people get sort of directed to, don't just generalize what men's work is, because I do, for me, because I think about when I was where I was 6 years ago, I wouldn't have gone into the big hugs and all these weird things, and I'm only still just sort of opening up to it now. But it's also something that I don't recommend to people just yet, because I understand where they're at on the journey, and sort of the people that do resonate with my sort of stuff. And I still like to be the bloke that still, because my goal is to take people like who I was and just get them to start working on their emotional intelligence, whatever that looks for. And then obviously once you start doing that, you go down the rabbit hole whichever way you'd like, right? Like it's open to, and some things I thought would be really cool weren't, and some things I didn't think would be really cool were, right?
Yeah.
And it is what it is. So I think it's a fun journey, and I think the most important part is not to generalize, and because I've done it, because I was, when people called me a conscious man and stuff, I used to hate that. I was like, fuck, aren't we all conscious? Like, come on. But I understand what it means, but no, I just choose the language that I like to use and what would probably resonate to me, 5-6 years ago.
Mate, yeah, that's exactly, how we see it as well. And even on a chat I was having today around like making sure whoever it is you decide to work with is a good fit for you. And there is, albeit at very early stages of the men's work, there is a good fit for most people. And, that's one of the things I like what you guys are doing up in Brizzy. It's like, there's almost this bell curve of your average Aussie blokes. And, I think they're the big group that are getting missed at the moment. The ones who like the psychologists and psychiatrists and are more open to that. And then the others that like the kind of spiritual and, other path are drawn to that. But there's a big group of blokes in the middle who, are very resistant to it, and we're obviously exposed to a lot of those guys, and very much kind of beginners in this space. And I'm sure you're aware of this as well. With a lot of guys, it's like you've got one shot. You know, like they're already resistant, and if they dip their toe in and it's too much or too woo or whatever, the door, you know, the toe comes out and the door's closed. So to be able to kind of resonate with you is a really strong and important part.
100%. Yeah, you literally get that one shot, like, and if it's too much, it's fucking done. And
Yeah.
you know, the way I view it as well is like, because the coaching space is getting so busy, right? And I'm not the first person in it as well, so I don't. But what I think is really important to think about is because it is booming, because you know coaching is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Which, just like when personal trainers were booming, there's going to be a lot of good coaches and people who are in it for the right reasons, but there's also going to be a lot of people who probably shouldn't be in the space, but are just doing it because it's the fastest growing thing, or everyone's saying be an entrepreneur or do this, do that, and the other. But so I think it's really important for everyone coming into this space and for everyone who's wanting to just grow as an individual anyway, to be mindful that you're dealing with people's fucking lives here. Like, there's the statistics on suicide are disgusting. Right, so we need to make sure that every interaction we have, and you know, if you're in the, I guess, the position of being a coach, you should probably have, you know, some sensory acuity or spatial awareness to read the room and read body language and be able to sort of build rapport before you sort of start dictating that. And that's why for a lot of people, maybe the one-on-one route's the best, or going to a men's circle, or going for a beer at the pub, and then just sort of starting to spruik. You know, because I saw some of the events that you guys do, like that's fucking brilliant. You know what I mean? Like where you run an event and lads get to have that environment that most of us, and once again, I'm generalizing there, but most, you know, coming from the background, the sporting background, like you used to being in teams and with mates having a bit of banter and a laugh and a beer, but then all of a sudden, you know, someone you respect or someone you know of starts talking about some, you know, more vulnerable stuff. So you actually get their attention, and then all of a sudden the conversation shifts a little bit. It's not like going, you know, straight down the rabbit hole or long big hugs just yet, but it makes you to go, oh, I'm a bit more curious around how he got to that point where he was brave enough to share what he's going through. And that's when people sort of start taking their own steps.
Mate, yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you're very kind of proactive in sharing, you know, your struggles and your challenges. How was that when you were going through that worst, you know, the worst period for you? Like how was it in terms of, did you have someone to reach out? How was it in terms of being vulnerable? What was that like for you?
Mate, I was lonely. Like for me, so I started, I guess one of the main motivators for me at that point in time, which I'm honest about, was money. This was before I was a coach, but for me, I you know, when I moved back from France, I was playing rugby over there, and I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do, right? So I was working as a builder, doing my apprenticeship. I absolutely hated it, and I didn't like the environment. I didn't like the way I was acting or behaving. And then, you know, I got introduced to network marketing, and for me, a desperate dude who just wanted to change my life, I was like, that's the greatest fucking thing ever. So I was around a lot of supportive people. Like a few things that I like about that profession is the personal development, the great group cultures, and all those sorts of things. And that, I guess, really encouraged me. But, you know, in that process, I got, I guess, a personal development ego, and I thought I was better than the people I used to hang around. So I cut off and lost a lot of my, you know, mates that I'd had for, you know, since I was a kid. So I'm sort of working on building that back, and you know, that's sort of one of the challenges that I'm overcoming at the moment. So I think, you know, going through that sort of space, I had a lot of support, but I didn't really have people to challenge me as to why I was doing certain things and why I was acting in a certain way, because you know, I was all about reading and wanted to public speak and share my journey. And you know, I got criticized. I got Facebook pages made about me. You know, I had, you know, the loss of all the mateships and stuff like that. So it was a fucking lonely time. But for me, the one thing that kept me going was the fact that I was like, I'm building a business, you know, it was network marketing, but that's what I was building on. And I didn't, you know, it was a good lesson for me because I wasn't focused on friendships at that point in my life, which is, I realized when a few years down the track, I was like, fuck, I'm lonely. Like I have a lot of people supporting me, but I don't have that mateship anymore. So I put myself in that situation, and it's something that I'm trying to repair. Granted, I have a lot of great people in my life now who, I support what I do and challenge me and empower me all in the right ways, because I think through going through that whole sort of period, I've understood more about what I want and what I'm prepared to sacrifice bits of and moderate certain relationships. So it's challenging. I think it's always, none of us have the answers. I don't think. I think the only way you can really learn it is through experience. And would I take back losing those mates and damaging those relationships? Probably not, because had I not done that, I might not have learned the skills that have got me to this point now where I'm really happy with my life.
Yeah, resonate with plenty of that. How's your values changed from that period of your life to what you value and find fulfillment in now?
Mate, it's so funny because I was literally had a client here about an hour ago, and he's looking at my bookshelf, which is right here, and he's like, mate, that's impressive. I was like, mate, the one thing that excites me more than anything, which I never would have said 6 years ago, is the fact that my ideal holiday would be to go away with some books, surfboard, go for a surf, read for, get through 5 books over a week or something like that, and then get to implement and learn things. Like I value now is like growth, like just understanding things. Like I'm really enjoying problem solving, but then how can I implement it into my life and sort of reflect on experiences that I've had and use that to tell stories. Did I cut out?
Yeah, back. I got it. Yeah. So you're talking about your personal development.
So like learning those things and learning how I can introduce those tools or new perspectives into previous life experiences to then tell stories that people can sort of connect and resonate with. But also just being healthy. Like I used to probably, much like a lot of young fellas and maybe females as well, is where when you're young, you just want to get pissed and party. Like it's fun. I've noticed, like, don't get me wrong, I love having some beers and wines, and that can lead to a great night. But I'm always thinking about tomorrow morning. I want to go for a hike, or I'm looking forward to reading this, or having this conversation with that person. Not really sort of feeling heavy-headed and all that sort of stuff. I think one thing that resonated with me a couple of years ago was when I heard that Richard Branson, he sort of plans when he's going to have a big night on the beers or anything, and sort of make sure that there's nothing that he really needs to be proactive or productive for the following day. And that's sort of how I live my life. Like this weekend, I'm planning on having a big weekend, but it'll be the first big weekend I've had in ages. So do I look forward to how I'm going to feel Sunday and Monday? Probably not, but I'm not working Sunday or Monday, so I'm pretty prepared for it.
Mate, we're the same at this end, and I, obviously Byron, there's plenty going on, and we're in a very fortunate position where not many people around here realise that there's a pandemic, although we've probably got different opinions on that. But we're the same of like, looking ahead to a big weekend coming up and just taking the Monday and Tuesday off, and also giving ourselves that break. Like we won't feel good on the Saturday, we probably won't feel good on the Sunday, but knowing, that isn't exacerbated by the fact that we don't get much work done on the Monday and Tuesday, just kind of giving ourselves a little, pass to have a really good cracking weekend. And then, take it easy for a few days. And that's the big thing, like I think that's the thing that probably people resonate with you, and definitely is what people resonate with us, is staying relatable. Do you know what I mean? There's like, in terms of people resonating with your message, being relatable, like we like going for a drink, we like the footy, different codes of footy, you and I.
I'm all into AFL now. I'm hooked.
He's on. But I think that's what, that's the bit that I'm excited about in the men's space is, people like you and us who most of this core group in the middle can relate more to. And, you know, what I've seen, or the way I see the kind of landscape, is that, you know, mental health has probably been normalized over the last 4 or 5 years. And Are You OK Day in MoMENtum and those guys have done a really good job. But for me, there's bringing awareness to it and normalizing it. And then there's, you know, building some kind of foundation to support that. You know, it's all good having the day, but where are these support programs, which I think is a really exciting next evolution. What would you say, you know, your partner, I assume, has experienced some kind of ebbs and flows as well with you and what you've been through, and we have a huge audience of females. What do you think was the best thing that she did in terms of supporting you through those challenges, and even potentially how you're a better partner now that you've done, you know, I won't say the work never ends, but a lot of work?
Yeah. I think she just never judged me. Like, I never felt judged. Like, there was times where she definitely didn't know what to do or what to say or how to act. You know, I always use the I say example, but it's an experience. The experience, we were over in a PNG on this nice island, and one day I just couldn't get out of bed and I was feeling rubbish, and no one understood what the fuck was going on. So for me, being able to communicate that and just already have that, have that conversation, because one thing that I believe is important, and it's really important, you know, you speak about it's becoming more accepted and understood, and I think as a result of that, we need to, as individuals, accept responsibility and go, right, well, I actually need to understand, you know, my emotions and what causes me to feel certain ways and what causes me to get out of feeling certain emotions, because, you know, you can sort of start to, I guess, build or find patterns. And for me, like, I know some fairly significant things which I think are pretty, you know, effective for most people, that if I neglect them, I'll hit you know, a pretty significant low after about 3 days. And that happened while we were away in PNG, and I was like, fuck. Like, I knew this was going to happen, but here it is, and I can't get out of bed. And I knew all I wanted to do was get out of bed and think positive and, you know, do all the stuff that, you know, they say works, but it's hard. So like, I just sat there, I explained it to Amy, and then I just laid there and, you know, started watching some YouTube clips, and I was there for, you know, 2 days. And once I got out of that funk, you know, I had the conversation with everyone, and you know, I started talking more openly about that now, so people sort of understand maybe how they can navigate it themselves, or the conversations that they need to have. But my goal was to, you know, bring it down from 2 days to a day and, you know, a day and a half, and understand strategies or ways of thinking to help that. But throughout that whole period, like, I never felt, you know, judged or supported, and she's always been there to understand and always curious, because I think, you know, whether she has been through it herself or not, it's just like, well, this dude needs support from time to time. And sometimes what support looks like for me and how I like it is when I'm navigating my own shit, I like being left alone. And it's not because I want to do anything dangerous or anything. I just need my time, because it's something that I value, is my own time. I need space. So having, I guess, set boundaries, or, you know, things like that in place to sort of know, like, I know when I'm going through moods, as I'm sure you probably do as well. So I've set boundaries in place, and sometimes it means I don't want to talk to you, and it's not personal. It's just, I don't fucking want to talk to you. Or it might mean I need to go for a surf or go catch up with the lads. Like, you put things in place to, you know, support you through that time. It's not always guaranteed, like, nothing's absolute, but if it, you know, trial and error, like, 9 times out of 10, it works a treat.
I think, you know, we obviously alternate weeks between guys and girls, and talk, you know, often about with females about relationships and just that dynamic. And one of the simple but so effective questions is like, how can I support you? Because I assume, based on the example you just gave then, is how she can support you one day is to kind of be there for you, and then how she can support you the next day is, you know, just to give you a huge amount of space, and not to make those assumptions, but just literally to communicate it, which I assume is a real life example for you of, like, it changes depending where you're at and how you feel.
Exactly. And I think it just goes back to, if you want to know, and, touch on Are You OK Day, they've done an amazing um, job of bringing awareness. But the next stages, once you have an understanding and awareness, is how do we get people to act, right? And most people act when they have certainty or trust, right? So that's not just given, or that just doesn't happen. It requires consistent action, right? So in order for you to build trust in it from a mateship standpoint, one day a year we go, are you okay? If I haven't spoken to you all year, I'm not going to fucking tell you. I'm not like, what are you even talking to me for? But if like, that's for me on my phones, and this is probably a good thing for people to just do if you don't already do it. But I have my 6, closest mates in my favorites list on my phone. I call them every week. It's like a little to-do list. I just call them to check in what's been happening. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 20-minute phone call, but because I want to continue building that relationship, letting them know that I'm there for them, finding out what's going on in their life, and the same goes with the relationship, right? Because we put the work in. Because I think you spoke about this on maybe it was last week or the week before, when you were talking about the energies, masculine and feminine. But like, we need to continually put the work in that relationship, right? And just because you've been together, like myself and my partner have been together for nearly 7 years, but I'm a completely different person now than I was back then, and she's a completely different chick to what she was 7 years ago. So every day it's like, get home and find out what's been going on, what they're thinking about, what's going on in their life, so that you can sort of understand what's changing. Because as you just mentioned, things change. You could read an email, have a conversation that shifts a belief or shifts your perspective on something. So if you aren't there to sort of understand that and find that out, how do you wonder why people aren't on the same page, or arguments happen, or people grow apart because they just stop doing the simple stuff to build trust and keep that connection together. And obviously, where I was sort of going with that on a bit of a tangent, but I was bringing it back to where you were saying, we've got to never assume. We treat every conversation like it's a fresh one, because anything could have happened in 12 hours or 2 hours.
Yeah, mate, the trust bit is fascinating. And do you follow any of Aubrey Marcus' stuff?
Yeah, mate, I do. I was actually listening to him earlier today.
Yeah, so he sent an email a couple of weeks ago, which I found really interesting. He was talking about how he didn't have any allies until he was 26. And it's not like he didn't have mates, but there was always like to really trust someone. And it's interesting because I've done the same exercise with Genoa of like, how many relationships have you got where there's no ego involved, or there's no, just this kind of little subtle, like, oh, I wouldn't mind seeing them split. Like, as rough as it is to sound, for that to be real clean, trusting energy between two people is actually, pretty rare. And it's so unfortunate that so many of us feel the need to compete and compare with mates. And I don't know how you felt. I felt this fucking so many times. It's like, if I feel an inkling that you have a need to compete or compare with me, I just can't be vulnerable, because for me, that shows an element of like, you will, put that in a different context and be like, oh, cool, he's kind of struggling a bit. So it's really interesting that trust bit of like, as soon as there's an element that we're competing, whether it's one way or not, I just can't go to the levels that I want to. So when you're building trust, what are the things, in your eyes, whether it's from a relationship point of view or even a friendship, is there certain things that stand out to you where you're like, that's a really good trait to have from a trust point of view, or even something that your partner's done to build trust over the last 7 years, or even if she's communicated to you what you've done to improve and increase your trust over the last 7 years?
Yeah.
Big question.
Mate,
loaded question, mate. Sorry.
Saying, like, oh, mate. No, that was a cracker, because even when you were saying, like, you've got that little element that you hope they'll fail, or there's a competition, and mate, like, that's me. Like, it's funny you bring that up, and it just sort of clicked for me. I have two mates where day in, day out, I'm like, I wish the fucking best for you. But then I have other mates and I still consider good mates and I, back them. But I still have moments where I'm like, maybe just, if you failed, that'd be cool or something like that. Like, and it's something that I work on all the time because I don't want to be in that mindset. I don't want to have those moments, but I still do because, well, I actually can't explain why, but it's something that I'm like, well, when you think about it logically, like, why the fuck would you want one of your mates not to succeed? But I think I still go through it, whether it's ego or, whatever. So when you brought that up, I was like, there's only, the two mates came to mind straight away where I'm like, every time I see them, I don't care what's happening. I hope they're crushing it. So that was cool. Thanks for that. Back to the question, with things that help me build trust. I think for me is like an alignment in values, but more than anything is authenticity, integrity, and integrity. Like I feel like I'm good at reading like people's integrity, like, or energy, and I call it pretty quickly whether I think people are full of shit. And for me, everything, like if I work with you or if I hang out with you, I need to, select you based on someone I'd have a beer with. And if I feel like you're not authentic or you're out of integrity or, your values just don't align, I don't want anything to do with you. And I used to think of it as probably a bit harsh, but I think, our time's so limited and, I think a lot of people want to communicate and chat and go for coffee and do all these things, which is awesome. But if I'm around that, it's just more negative on myself. So I think, then moving forward to how we built trust with Amy, and she's probably the first girl I've been with where I haven't had jealousy. And granted, like you said, I've put in a lot of work on myself to get over, I guess, those jealous moments and everything like that. But it's the complete support and like that feeling of no judgment. It's just like you are who you are, and fucking I don't care. So I think that, but then also just knowing I can say whatever I want, act however I feel I need to act, which has allowed me to become more vulnerable and not that fear of judgment. So yeah, I think, and hearing other people's vulnerable moments and experiences sort of allows you to open up and know that as well, because I think it takes a lot to trust someone enough to share some stuff. So when they're sharing with you, it's like, well, it's like back in the day when they used to do like the cut of the hand and do the high fives and for like the blood brothers, and now it's just like, let's just share some bad experiences and save the cuts.
Mate, you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. I think first and foremost, like I always look at communication. The first area to look at or improve upon is communication with self, because I think if you're lying to yourself, you're never really going to be honest or authentic with the world around you. Sorry, I think my headphones are just playing up. One moment. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
All right, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. Not sure what happened there, but we are back. Can't even remember the question I asked, but the big fella was about to rip into a very strong answer. He should be back in a second, then we can rip in. If you guys have got any questions, feel free to post them below, and we will get onto them if we can. Just waiting for him to come back. Here we go. He's back, then we can continue. Oh, that's what we're talking about, communication. Hang on.
All right, we're back.
We're on.
We're back.
Yeah, back to where we were. So where to start with communication. So I think, if I were to wind back the clock, like my first port of call would be to, start being honest with myself, because I think a lot of us know what we want to say, know what we want from life, know what we're feeling, but we just, for whatever reason, whether it's fear of judgment, fear of comparison, fear of not being good enough, we don't accept it, and we don't step into that. We don't live in that light. So that's where I would start. But then, when we're diving into communication with the world around us, whether it's, with your mates, with your partners, with your employees or your employers, and all those sorts of things, I think a lot of us are worried about saying the wrong thing. Like I had a guy in a workshop, and he's like, I made him do a Facebook Live, and he's like, fucking knew it fucking happened. Like I just didn't know what to say, and I fucked up again. Now I look like a dickhead. I'm like, well, what would you say differently? Like, go back and watch it back, and what would you say differently next time? And then get some feedback, and you go, okay, well, that's where I went wrong. Here are a few words I could add in next time, or here's how I might not swear as much, or I might not pause, or I might not say or, we learn through doing. So I think looking to communicate, start with the place of being honest with yourself, because if you're honest with yourself, you can ask for more of what you want from life, right? And then during those conversations, you're gonna, have to navigate around to work out how to best get what you mean across, because it doesn't always come out how you expect it to. Because obviously, think about this: there's 2 of us on here, but there's 10 people listening, which means there's 10 different ways you can interpret what I'm saying right now, and you're going to generally interpret it in a way that suits you. So we need to, my favorite quote of all time is seek to understand before being understood, right? So if you need more clarity around what someone is saying, ask better questions. Don't just take it as the first sentence. Sorry, don't take it as the first sentence that comes out of the mouth, right? Which is what I used to do. I still remember when I first started dating Amy, we went to a pub, and I was talking to this gentleman. He said one of the things that changed my life. He's like, "Oh, what do you like about Brisbane? And how long have you been down here?" And I was like, "Oh, whatever, 3 months or whatever." And I just think it's fucked. Everyone's fucked. And this guy just goes, "Mate, how about you use some real words to tell me how you really feel? Like, start letting it better." And at that point in time, I was ready to punch his head in, because I was still in that's how I did things back then. But it's stuck with me ever since. So even to this day, I know I'm not the most articulate person. I'm much better than I was, but I also know I still swear a lot. And there's moments where I'm lazy, I mumble a bit. So I'm constantly working on how I can, communicate better. And whether that's with the choice of words, or understanding how, for example, how Amy interprets things. So I need to use language differently around her as opposed to how I might use it around you, right? So being aware of that, and then obviously being as specific in as short amount of words as possible is generally works a treat as well. So to everyone out there, I just trial and error and fail. Like you guaranteed to say the wrong thing, guaranteed, but you can never a quote I wrote the other day, which I can't remember where I read it, was like, you can never say the wrong thing in the right room, right? If people genuinely give a shit about you and genuinely want to understand you, they'll ask better questions. Surely, like, if you want clarity, ask.
Mate, it's brilliant, and it you say it with such ease and grace, but I think it's a thing that many of us don't do, is just like ask more questions. And so often, in a relationship context as well, we have such a different perspective of the same thing. And Brene Brown talks about this a lot. Like, we were both in the room, we both saw the same thing, but she went off on, a tangent very left, and you went off on right. And if that's not communicated, then you're like, fuck, I don't know how you got there, but this is actually what I was thinking so often. And that's a really big piece as well, which, is probably one of the pieces I've struggled with the most, is understanding, from an ego point of view, is understanding that their perspective is just as right as yours, albeit completely different to you so often.
100%. It's like, well, you've got a choice, right? And this is why, people talk a lot, whereas I've always been I got picked on for being quiet and just listening. Like, I was happy to just sit there and listen. Even in events that I run, I'll listen to what people are saying, because I believe that everyone's an expert in something that you're not. And there's only two things are going to happen, right? When you seek to understand why someone believes something or is talking in that way, and it's like, one, it's going to validate your belief more, that it's true to you, or two, you're going to learn something fucking new. Right? Like, only good can come of it. So if people, even just listening, like, I've taken away just a lot from the questions that you asked, right? So for me, getting off this call, I'm going to be like, well, I now have a few new questions I can ask, and just different ways of asking them, right? So if you just listen to people and the way they use language, it's powerful. Like, if you don't know the right words to say, start listening to audiobooks. Like, find people like Aubrey Marcus, like you said, or people that you resonate with or relate to. Start listening to, if they've got podcasts or audiobooks, or tune into stuff like this where you can listen to people that you hopefully relate to, and then you can start seeing the questions that they ask or how they respond to things, and then you can keep it in your bloody tool belt and you're good.
Yeah, brilliant. How, with all the personal development that you've been doing over the last few years, this might be quite hard to answer. I keep doing this to you. Sorry. But how do you see your connections with people differently? And can you articulate what it is that has created that difference in terms of connection, communication, community, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I just think I'm a lot more understanding, because I give people the time. Like, I was saying only a moment ago, if I don't think you're authentic or integrity, I won't listen to you. But I think I'm more open to learning from people, whereas back in the day I was just so stubborn and I couldn't get out of my head to give myself the opportunity to, I guess, listen to people and understand and really take everything that I could from those interactions and communities and communication. So I think now that we've created this community where I get to learn from people who run $100 million companies, down to people who've just finished school, down to some people who've been homeless and others have never had a struggle in their life. Like, it's cool to be involved in a conversation like that, where you get to hear all these perspectives and people get along from it. Like, everyone feels equally as humbled, and to be a part of that is like, well, that's just, for me, made me understand what this. Well, I believe I feel like I know what life's about now, whereas before it was all about money and success and fame. But now it's like, well, if I'm having a really bad day, I'm just going to get a few blokes to get, like, even doing this for me right now is energizing, and it's fucking awesome. Right? Being able to just have a yarn with a good person is that's what it's about. At the end of the day, it's like communication and honestly being able to talk about things that, excite you or you might be able to share something of value makes me feel fucking good. And I know it makes everyone else feel good.
this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, and I think you'll be able to articulate pretty well, is because I completely resonate with what you just said. What are your driving forces now compared to what they were, or even what are your values? And this is kind of what I was saying, because I was chasing that fucking carrot like everyone else around the money, the hamster wheel that so many people are on, and just you get the shinier car and you're like, oh fuck, it lasted 48 hours. I got to drive it down the main street and tell everyone about it. I got the promotion, whatever it may be. It just never ever hits the sweet spot. So for you, what does that sweet spot look like now, and how has that changed over the last, by the sounds of it, 3 to 4 years?
Yeah. You know, for me, it goes health, happiness, integrity, appreciation. Like, I still love that. And I'll quickly touch on that in a moment. And then adventure and growth. Like, if I can get that in my life, like, that's, to me, like, I'm the most simple fucker. And I say this to everyone, right? Like, I'm the most simple fucker. And when we talk about the 5 love languages, I just love physical touch and words of affirmation, because I don't need anything. I don't buy clothes. Like, I wear the same, like, out clothes. Like, my smart wear is fucking 10 years old, because I just don't care. What I care about is, like, adventure, you know, conversations, learning new skills, trying different things. Like, that's what matters to me. And it's like, I know one of my biggest challenges in saying all of that is, like, I'm still struggling to be super present with, you know, because I'm also running a company. So I'm always like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? But it's probably even been the last, probably this year, COVID actually, where I've learned to be like, well, nothing's going to stop if I have a few days to myself, or if I take an extra 5 minutes in that conversation, or if I do this, that, and the other. So it's really shifted more into, like, just being fucking present, and just understanding that the more I can work on myself and given everyday situations and processes or systems is going to, you know, provide much more value than if I run $100 million company in the way that I want it, because with, you know, added money comes stress. But back in the day, you know, was chasing fame, like, that's all I wanted, because I thought if I became famous, you know, I would get all the girls, I'd get all the money, and life would be fucking sorted. But you know, when I was playing footy over in France, I was still a fucking miserable bastard. Like,
yeah,
you know, I still I took all the same bad habits and way of thinking with me, and I just did it on a bigger scale.
It's I'd say it's funny, but it's not funny at all. But it's interesting that Jim Carrey says it perfectly. He's like, I wish everyone could experience fame and money to know it's not the answer. And what I found really interesting about that is I would have heard that quote 100 times, and I had to get to a certain level and crash before, and crash properly before I just started to reassess everything. And similar to you now, like, the clothes on my back, I'm a pretty strong minimalist. It just doesn't make a difference. And I'm so glad that I've been able to get off that hamster wheel, similar to you, and to be able to share those stories with hopefully people that, you know, ideally don't have to go through the pain that you and I went through. But unfortunately for many, they have to experience it themselves before they really kind of resonate with, you know, the story that you're sharing.
It's interesting, hey, and, like, you think about a lot of the, like, you know, when we look at, like, suicide rates from last year, right, and financial stress, breakdown of relationship, custody battles, unemployment, right, being some of the biggest determining factors as to why men take their life. And I'm sure it probably is the same for females, but I just read more of the male statistics, we can do so much to fucking prevent that without materialistic shit. Like, you check in on your mates, and, you know, if your mates is, you know, have lost their, and COVID probably a good example right now, like, lost their job or struggling financially, or if you've been at home with your missus too long and it's causing a relationship breakdown, like, it's a real thing. Or you are going through a relationship breakup or custody battles. Like, these are real things that fucking push blokes over the edge, because a lot of us don't know how to deal with it. Now, had we, and you know, this is why this is fucking brilliant, is, like, you're creating conversations which are going to get men to start having more conversations, and hopefully women can be a part of that, because it's all needed, right? Because women ask better questions than most men do ever as well.
Yeah.
All the tools we need, all the resources that we need, all the strategies that we need come from communication, not come from fucking buying your next fucking whatever. You know what I mean? Like, we can sit here now and bring on bloke after bloke and have a conversation and give him, you know, absolute certainty and some great perspective on, you know, how to overcome the biggest challenge that he's facing right now. But, you know, if a bloke doesn't have, as you were talking about before, the trust with mates to be able to share when he's really fucking struggling because of a relationship or financially, if he doesn't have the community that says, hey, bro, if you're struggling for coin, like, come stay at my place, I'll feed you, like, and not expect anything in return. Right? If you're dealing with custody battles, bro, sleep over and, you know, I'm here with you if you need me to go through whatever, I'm here. Like, if we knew that stuff's free, which, surprise, there you go, it's fucking free, that's all that matters. Like, and now that you know that, now that you're aware of that, all the other external stresses you put on yourself by having to have the nice car, house, all the friends in the world, Instagram followers, all that sort of shit's irrelevant. Like, it's nice, don't get me wrong, it's cool. It does allow you to have a little bit more. But with more comes more responsibility, more stress, more everything. So if we can just, I talk about this, now when I talk about 8 areas of life, like, let's use finances, for example. A lot of the stress we have financially is because of the stuff we spoke about before, you know, buying nice clothes, having the latest iPad, car, all that sort of stuff. But if you just kept your baseline as what's going to keep you clothed, fed, and sheltered, everything else is you accept it as an additional stress. And if it's too much for you to handle, maybe reel it back a bit, or maybe build a better support network to you know, to walk with you as you're pushing your threshold a little bit. Like, all these things are free: communication, community, you know, creating purpose, like, all these things anyone can do, and you don't need to spend money to, I've gone on a big fucking tangent, have I?
That's so good. It's brilliant.
I didn't even
you and I are very passionate about this topic, which is good. But that's the fuck thing, is the system. And I get angry about this, because you're not taught these skills at school. You're not taught, like, communication skills. You're not taught of really the value in connection, communication, you know, community, because it doesn't run the economy. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like, we don't learn this because it doesn't support the system, so to speak.
Yep.
And it reminds me, you know, you use the example of, and fuck, it warms my heart when you talk about the example of, like, a mate, if he's struggling. Like, I will never forget when I was at rock bottom, the difference between one house where I stayed for a few weeks and the feelings that I had there of not feeling comfortable, feeling like I was a bit judged and whatever, and then to go to another house and just feel like I could completely relax. Because when you're at rock bottom, fuck, you've got very little energy and love to give. But just to feel like I could literally just lie on the couch and just no judgment, no anything. And, you know, he's a mate now who, you know, is part of our group, but he'd never picked up a personal development book. He'd never fucking read anything. He just had that in him, where it was just no judgment. It's like, mate, fuck, you hit rock bottom, like, just let us know how I can support you. And that no judgment piece, especially when you're struggling, is, like, amazing. And there's not, you know, you kind of mentioned it before about going through a period where you're lonely. When you're struggling, it's hard. When you're struggling and lonely, it is fucking, like, the worst. So yeah, I resonate.
100%. That's why, like, if people want to, you know, a lot of us are happy to try and work overtime and do all that stuff because we think it's improving our quality of life. How about you don't do the overtime and just fucking create better relationships, or, you know, learn some other tools and strategies that are going to help you as an individual. Like, that's fucking good overtime. That's overtime well spent that you're in control of, right? Because at the end of the day, what's an extra $40, $50? Like, and granted, depending on where you are, like, if you're at rock bottom, $40 can completely change your life. Get that. But most people, if you're working a full-time job or any sort of, you know, job, work on the stuff that's going to support you long term. When, if money gets taken away, you've got the support systems, you have the ability to communicate, you have the ability to upskill or understand what you're feeling and experiencing.
Well, I think, mate, to be honest as well, and obviously a lot of people experience it at the moment. You know, so many of us built our titles and our egos and our identity, especially for the male, but, you know, definitely not exclusive to the male by any means, built it on our career and our income and everything.
Yep.
And, you know, you've experienced it firsthand when it's been stripped away from a lot of people, and they're fucking, you know, to them, they're bare bones and not sure who they exist without. It's really interesting to watch, you know, what we're attracted to, what, you know, we even kind of hang our hat on. And obviously, you know, you've got quite a strong following as well. I had the conversation on the podcast today, a guy who, you know, attracts quite a young crowd, and they're still drawn to, like, how can I get more followers and how can I get more freebie? And, like, thinking that's the answer, like, fuck, it's not even close to the answer. But yet we've created this picture of what that looks like some kind of success, which is super disturbing.
It's fucking disgusting is what it is. I hate it. Because I used to do all that fucking influencer shit, like up until probably my last fucking last thing was like 18 months ago or something. And by the amount of time it took me to get the post right and do all that sort of stuff, I was like, I could have 5 times this amount of money. And after that, I was like, one, I'm grateful that I've been in integrity, so I don't ever do a job that, you know, was something I would use anyway. But after that, I was like, fuck this, you know, fuck the followers as well. Like, I'm grateful for everyone who, you know, supports my stuff and gets value from it, but I don't need it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I have everything taken away and I'm completely okay. Like, my business could go fucking bankrupt and I don't care. Like, I know I'll read. Like, and I even say, like, I don't know if I'm going to be running the Man That Can project in fucking 10 years. I don't know. My life is still, like, I'm just going with whatever feels right. And I know, you know, some people might go, well, that's fucking stupid, but I don't want to be miserable. And I also know that, you know, I don't have all the skills and all the answers, so I could fuck up, and I probably will fuck up again. I've fucked up many times in my life, so chances are I'll probably do it again, but it's not going to define me like it used to.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, a big part of that for you, which you're in a fortunate position, is it doesn't need to define you because you've got people around you who don't let it define you. Do you know what I mean? Like, a fuck up is a fuck up. You know, the missus will just pass it off. There won't be the level of judgment. And when you've got the good crew around you, it's easier to lean into your shadow or to the stuff that isn't as sexy. And that's really challenging for a lot of people, to be able to, like, go, well, this is the ugly part of me. And fuck, it's a nice relationship when you've got a partner who can just go, yeah, I know, I've seen it and I love it. And, you know, part of me even loves more of that of you when you kind of just own it and it is what it is. So, you know, one of the bit.
Do that.
What's that?
How good is it when you can just fucking embrace that part of yourself as well? Like, there's so many people that are so fearful of, you know, I work with people like in professional roles, and you're like, man, why don't you just tell people like that? Because the next generation in your profession are coming through struggling, thinking they have to be exactly how you are, and you're here because you don't like how you are based off the, you know, the people before you that you modeled their behavior. How about one of you fucking people put up your hand? By you people, I don't want to get criticized for that, but in that profession, it's like, put your fucking hand up and say, I am struggling. This is what I don't like about this profession. This is what needs to change, because, you know, it's ruining relationships. It's ruining me. It's ruining this, that, and the other. It's like, we need to change things. Like, we can be really good at our job and fucking share our struggles. Or you can still be a really good dad or person or brother and still have struggles. But a lot of people are worried about leaning into that dark side, or that the real them, because of, for, you know, whatever reason. But the moment that you can have a good, like, I'm, you know, when I talk about all the cheating, lying, manipulating, all that sort of shit, and you know, I'm grateful for it and I own it, and I'm glad I can, because I don't have anything hiding.
Yeah. It's really it's really stressful and quite exhausting to have a lot of stuff hiding. And I think, one of the challenging things for people is often there's so much guilt, shame, judgment, embarrassment that comes with that shadow stuff. So for those that haven't heard the term shadow, it's essentially the stuff behind you that you don't want to kind of integrate or acknowledge, and stuff that we kind of try and hide in the closet. And when you create a better relationship with the shadow stuff, the shame that you built around it falls away pretty quickly. So fuck, mate, I think similar to you, I've done some stupid shit, which is just embarrassing. There has been shame around it. As soon as I kind of talk about it and it's open, the shame falls away. Gaslighting, all those things that show up in relationships, which, to be fair, if you and I knew better, we would have done better. But, wherever it kind of stems from, it is what it is. But as soon as you educate yourself on it, and as soon as you give yourself forgiveness and step up and improve, then that can kind of fall away, because, the shame that you carry and the burden that you carry with that stuff is really heavy and toxic, essentially, as well.
100%. And you get to decide whether you want to carry it or fucking let it go.
Yeah. Mate, that's the only reason Instagram's let me go over an hour is because we cut off before and started again. Normally it would have cut me off 5 minutes ago. But mate, super insightful. Really appreciate you coming on. Loving the work you're doing in Brizzy. I see Janela's just jumped on here. We're hoping if Queensland ever open up to the rest of Australia, that we can come up for a beer and come to one of your events.
Mate, I'd love that, and hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. But keep up the great work you guys are doing as well. I'm loving seeing it. It's really interesting seeing all the different guests you have. I think it's I really enjoyed. I can't remember whether it was last week or the week before, but about the masculine and feminine. That was brilliant. So I think you guys are bringing a ton of value, and it'll be awesome when you get up here, and we'll be able to hit a few podcasts and have a few beers.
Perfect. Yeah, mate, definitely keen. Just speak to that chick that's running your state and see if she can open up for us, and we'll get in the car and come up.
Don't get me started.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate. Thanks for joining us.
See you, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, brother.